Okay, if you're hearing my voice, I'm very happy with you because that means you've made it to page 2 of the notes, and there's some good ones here. So this time we're going to take x cubed minus x squared minus 2x, which is f of x, and we want it to yield values more than -2, so greater than -2. All right, so obviously our first step, hopefully you're thinking, is to get this all to one side and the other side 0. So basically I want to always try GCF, doesn't work, but then if you actually try factor by grouping, it works well here. So x squared onto x minus 1, and then take that 2 out, and then we have x minus 1, and that works as well for grouping. So now I've got x squared minus 2 times x minus 1 greater than 0. All right, so I know we're not as comfy with that not being a perfect square, that value of 2, but it actually isn't too bad. The x value here would be 1, and then the x values here, 2 of them, would actually be plus or minus the square root of 2. Again, if we took x squared minus 2 and set it equal to 0, add 2 to both sides, we'd get x squared equals 2, and then we would end up with our 2 zeros there. All right, so remember the square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2, so square root of 2 is 1 point something. So we've got 1 point something without a calculator, which is great. Negative 1 point something, and then we've got 1. All right, so showing that, we've got 1 here. Let's just draw the scale somewhat large, so let's call, this a 2. And let's call, this a 0 and this a -1. So if we were talking about our zeros here, we've got one, at 1 that we were talking about. We've got one at 1 point something in here, and then we've got one at -1 point something over here. Okay, so actually in red, let me make those large here, we've got our regions here. Alrighty, okay, so we got to test values in those regions. Well, if I test a value way over here, I'm going to get 10 million squared minus 2, which is positive, times 10 million minus 1, which is positive. So this is a positive region. Right in here, if you want to test one, you can test 1.001 and just think of it that way. Well, that value squared minus 2 is going to be a negative, times a positive, because it'll be a slightly positive there. So we do have a negative region in there. 0 is an easy one to pick. -2 times -1 is going to give me a positive region in there. And then a very large negative will give me a positive here times a negative here, which is actually going to give me a negative region. So in this one here, we would like to shade anything greater than 0, right here, greater than 0, so that means our positive region. So we're going to come from here, and we're going to have a parenthesis, and we're going to go to there, and then we're going to have a parenthesis and go on to infinity. So remember what this 0 is. This is -√2 all the way up to 1 union, and then we have +√2 all the way to infinity. And I want to fire this up again. Hopefully you can make the connection here, but this would be, remember, -1 point something, that's actually -√2. And then in here, if you can see this, we have 1 and then √2. So if you go from -√2 all the way to 1, we have values greater than 0 in the function. There's a little gap here where it drops below, but then √2 to infinity, we actually have exactly everything we're talking about in this problem working out. Okay, one more. So find where this function, just to give you more practice. If you're getting the hang of it, maybe you can go try the practice now. But if you want to see how this one works out, then we can do that. So negative, let me switch colors here, harder to see. So negative x to the 4th plus 10 x squared minus 4 is no more than 5. So no more than is less than. So less than or equal to 5, because it can be 5. So I've got negative x to the 4th plus 10x squared minus 9 less than or equal to 0. And, me personally, I'm going to do this, I'm going to divide everything by -1. Now we got to be careful. By doing that, that's going to flip all of these. So that's negative becomes a positive. This is a minus 10x squared, and then we have a plus 9. But now we're going to have greater than or equal to 0, because if you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign. All right, so now I've got x squared minus 1, x squared minus 9, greater than or equal to 0. And my values are basically, well, let's factor it out some more. X plus 1, x minus 1, and then x plus 3, x minus 3, greater than or equal to 0. So when we go to graph it, and I'm going to try to teach us a little bit different this way this time for a different connection. But basically, if we were just to graph this, if it's set equal to 0, let's think of this maybe the way we have been all week and be like, oh, -1 would be right here, -2, -3 would be here, 1, 2, 3. So if I grab this and I'm like, okay, -1, there's a 0, 1, there's a 0, 3, there's a 0, and -3, there's a 0. What is this? Well, this is going to be if we look back, currently I'm graphing this one right here. We got to remember that. So that's going to open up, and then it's going to cross, 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 cross. And then basically, where are the values greater than or equal to 0? Well, that's going to be, bracket here, that's going to be all of this over here. That's going to be all of this in here. And that's going to be all of this over there. So if you think about, those are the 3 intervals where we have y values greater than 0 here. So if we weren't doing it that way, let me back it up to the testing of values. Don't forget, we would have, it's kind of this, same concept. We would have the -3, the -1, we'd have a 1, and we would have a 3. But what we would get is we'd get a positive region right here. We would get a negative region right here, positive region here, negative region here, and positive. So I'm skipping the testing, but that's what we would get. And then again, we would just, whoops, sorry, I missed the spot there, but I would go from there to there, here to here, and then there to there. So basically our final answer would be -infinity to -3, bracket union, -1 to 1, union 3 to infinity. And again, just to show you on our graph, since I got this fired up here. Now, when I look at this one here, it's what I have graphed, if you look at this, is I have actually graphed the original one. This is a fun way to end this here. If you see here, this is -x to the 4th plus 10x squared minus 9. So what I did, if I go back to this problem, is I graphed this one right here. Whoops, sorry. This one in phase 2 right here. Well, this one is saying less than or equal to 0. To algebraically solve it, I talked about dividing out that negative. Well, if I just graph this one, though, which is what's on my calculator, we would want to look at values where it's less than or equal to 0. So if you look at this one's going to open down like this, and then from here to, from -infinity to here, and then from negative, 1 to 1, and then from 3 to infinity. Those are where the function is actually less than or equal to 0. But it's still the exact same answer we have because we're just kind of thinking about it differently. So hope that tied together. Hope that made sense. Good luck on your practice.